I can sense the energy. Please take it easy. It's too much up here. Yes. Thank you for coming to the last valiant piece of programming for MoCA 2023. We're going to close the show. This is our much anticipated conversation on art and AI. My name is Victor Cohen. I am the chair of BFA Comics and BFA Illustration at SVA. We much appreciate the School of Visual Arts for sponsoring and hosting MoCA programming. These conversations are invaluable. AI presents different challenges and opportunities for different art disciplines. We will focus on illustration and comics. It was important that this panel represents different first-hand experiences with AI in order to be not interesting, we're beyond that, but helpful in meaningful ways. I am honored to share this table with Carson, Rebecca, and Tim. As a result of this conversation, I hope we will get a better understanding of AI and its ethics, distinguish perception and reality on its effects, help inform some of our personal conclusions when we leave this room. Carson Grubo, you are a visual artist and instructor at the Shelton-Stead Community College in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You're also a philosophy major, and it's not very often that one gets the opportunity to speak to a philosophy major up and close and personal. You also published AI-generated comics, so that puts you in a very, very unique situation to speak about it. When do you think your thinking met the technology? You've been preoccupied with AI for many years.
Yeah.
We discussed this.
The technology met my thinking.
Okay.
I would say when we got access to Midjourney in June, I got access to Midjourney on June 2nd of last year, and the first thing I generated, I just typed in Masamune Shiro. This weird, crazy, amazing looking thing came out, and I sent it to Sean, our publisher, and he said, "Oh shit." And then the next thing after we're screwed is we got to do a comic because someone's going to do a comic with it, and we thought it was very important that the first comic that was fully illustrated by AI was done in a way that engages with the ethical issues of it, the ontological issues, decentering our understanding of ourselves in the universe and what type of creatures we are. And just to make sure that the conversation was grounded, we got Luciano Floridi, who's just leaving Oxford and moving to Yale to found the Digital Ethics Center. He's an acquaintance of mine. He wrote the 5th issue is an essay on how to advocate for human dignity in a world where AI is going to become more prevalent. And so, but my thinking on this goes back to 2007 when I was thinking about writing a philosophy of information. And that in 2013 I published an article talking about a banal content apocalypse, which is now coming because of AI. So I feel like the tech finally caught up to me being able to say what I've been shouting into the void since 2007.
Do you think that technology makes your thinking just in time, too soon, or too late?
People's attention to what people like me were saying is too late because the tech is here and it's open source and you can't put it back in the box. Right, this is code. It's the process of diffusion models and how to train an AI is too easily understood to put it back in the box. And so, we can shout about it all we want, but the only thing to do now is move forward with a very deep philosophical understanding of the psychological consequences for the human race, how we'll deal with it, and how we advocate for our dignity. Also making sure you have proper understanding of what you're talking about, like the word intelligence shouldn't be in the conversation at all. That's an unanswerable question. So there's a lot of things that, like Luciano and people like him have been talking about since the mid-90s that just gets written off as philosophers, whatever. It's here, it's real, and he's on retainer at Google on their AI ethics commission and stuff like that, and that's why people like Google aren't rushing these things out, is because they have philosophers telling them the consequences. Midjourney and people like that don't have the proper philosophical understanding. That's capable. We're capable of doing it, so we'll do it. And that's in The Abolition of Man, the book we made with it. That first essay by C.S. Lewis was an essay I read when I was 20, and that's where all this started for me, is understanding what the end game of technological process is the abolition of man. We're trying to gain control over nature through technology, and we can predict apocalypses over and over, but there will be a point where technological advancement makes humanity irrelevant in some sense or another. And I think C.S. Lewis is always very smart in talking about progress as not blind progress, which is how science tends to handle it. A barrier, break through it, because we can. And if you really think about progress, the analogy he gives is, if you're trying to get somewhere, like for instance, if I'm trying to get to Canada and I see the road signs for Mexico showing up, there's no point in continuing further down that road. So progress is best defined by your end goal, and the person who's most progressive is the person who will turn around quickest if you're going the wrong way. And I've also come to think very recently about progress as expansional instead of linear, and I think that's something that C.S. Lewis missed and everyone else missed, is we've lost our connection to our roots. We're always moving forward, and we don't ever stay grounded. The tree is the perfect metaphor for how we should be going. We shed unnecessary branches, but don't mistake the shed branch for the snake.
Is there a better word for artificial, you think?
I'm not worried about artificial, I'm worried about intelligence, because people say, oh, well, you could pass a Turing test. And if you read Alan Turing's original paper, 1936 or whatever, Alan Turing, if you don't know, you should know, he created the idea of the universal computational machine, which is computers, that you can perform any task using off and on. He was the mathematician who figured that out. And the idea of the Turing test was actually from a paper where it was called Can Machines Think? Or are machines capable of being intelligent? He said that's an unanswerable question. You can't answer that, because intelligence, A, we don't even know what it is. B, we don't have epistemic access to what's inside of anyone else's head. So the only thing I have for any of you is behavioral evidence. You can tell me you're intelligent. You can tell me you're self-aware. You can tell me you're conscious. So the only thing you can define is within a very specific parameters with very strictly defined levels of abstraction, which is a very technical, formal term that I don't want to, get into the details of that. But you can only answer very constrained questions. So a Turing test isn't proof that something intelligent. All it is a formulation to say, can this thing perform under these set of circumstances in a way that the behavior is not different from a human? And you can only do that in a constrained domain. So you can do it, can it be a chat bot that when I chat with it and I don't know it's an AI, it's indecipherable from humans? And that's the most you can answer. Yes, it can do that. So with the AI art generators, you can't talk about is it creative, is it intelligent, or any of that. The most you can say is, does the output on the wall, if I put 20 AI images on the wall and 20 human images on the wall, and people didn't know which was which, could they distinguish? If no, then it's past the parameters for it can make a thing that seems as meaningful and as well made as a human. And that's the most you can answer. Can it do that? Yes, it can, obviously. So,
how is the experience of the process of making the comic books?
At first, really exciting, because the first issue we're putting in a C.S. Lewis essay, one sentence at a time, and you're getting these images back, and you're like, wow, the composition on this is amazing, and holy shit, this is scary. It all looks like Dave McKean art at that point in June. And so I realized, how good Dave McKean is, because he's so tapped into the collective subconscious, which is what the AI is, right? It's seen everything that we've done, and it's found the average of that, and that's why I think it looked like Dave McKean's stuff at first, and then it's been bullied through the users into this very bland average that you get now with like version 5 or photorealism, because that's what impresses people. Issues 2 and 3 of Abolition of Man, we try to tell a story, and that was frustrating. Like, there's so many times where I was like, I just need a guy talking to a guy in the hallway, and like I could draw this myself, and I'm spending an hour trying to change the prompt. Issue 4, we had an AI write it and illustrate it, and that was the script it wrote is disgusting and horrifying. And so that was, I was describing these scenes of like a big sex party with murdered, dead, bloody bodies in the background. Why is this what you wrote, like the AI? And so that was just each time I'm typing it in, you can't use that word. I go, blood, okay, I can't use blood, I use ketchup. Let's trying to get the images. And then Luciano wrote the 5th issue and his piece on human dignity. So it's fun, frustrating, exciting. It's kind of like a game, it brings back excitement to art. Like if you have a vision for art and then you spend, like a painting, 4 months painting it, there's no moment of like, wow, excitement. So it brought that back. And then I would say that I progressed more in the last 6 months as an artist when I'm not using AI. I'm a significantly better artist in the last 6 months, more growth in the last 6 months than in the previous 15 years because of the lessons I learned from looking at what it does. So like, hey, you can have hands that look like this and faces that look like mashed potato, and the image still communicates, and it still has real intense emotive, especially the early Mid-Journey stuff has really like Kathy Kolowitz level emotive capabilities. So that really freed me up to be thinking more iconic, thinking more in terms of composition, thinking more to those universal abstractions and things like that. So I feel like working with the AI, I could put it down and never use it again and be a significantly better artist for having interacted with it.
Is this your conclusion, you think? Because you usually paint and do comics. These are your two passions, correct?
Yeah, really comics is my passion. I went painting for 15 years, but I don't think I'll ever paint again because, I think one of the problems with the AI stuff, and it was a sense I had about painting that led me back to comics anyways, is for me, this is not a blanket statement, but for me, the power of a single image was getting lost. Like I felt like at least the things I needed to say, I needed comics again. I needed sequence. Like I couldn't make someone cry with a single image, or at least me when obviously I love painting, but when I look at, you hear about people go see Guernica and they're like, oh, and it's such an emotional experience, and I just like, oh yeah, he did this with the brush, and I'm too technical like when I look at art. So I need the story to suck me in, and so I go back to comics. Means a lot to me. Sorry, I lost the question.
that was perfect. So what do you think you're going to be doing next? Now we tested, we experimented, you've been frustrated and exuberated.
Yeah, I'll still use it. I think there's certain things where it's real good for brainstorming. Like I'm working on a story where these creatures kind of have a sympathetic relation with the environment around them and can mentally just form their building kind of telekinetically or whatever. And I kind of have a loose vision of these things, but I was struggling. It's like, but what if it was sculpted by Moore, his abstract sculpture. So you type that in real quick and it's like, okay, that gives me a sense of it, and then I can go from there and manipulate on my own. But my next 2 projects that I'm working on have no AI involved. They're just graphic novels I want to do. We are going to do an anthology that's kind of maybe an apology for the abolition of man, or I call it Revenge of the Inkslingers, but it'll be entitled Pareidolia, which is the psychological phenomenon that the AI are basically showing is what we're doing as artists too, is engaging in pareidolia. So it'll be titled Pareidolia, and what we're doing is I just typed in J.H. Williams comic page, and Dave McKean comic page, Frank Miller comic page, and I got 850 some odd total back when it sucked and it couldn't design a page. Now it can design a page, but totally wild page layouts and stuff, total nonsense. And we're having artists, and anyone that's interested, reach out to me. But we're having artists take those nonsense images and then engage in pareidolia, which is just like if you stare at the clouds and you see an image in the clouds, you're doing pareidolia, right? You're seeing something where there's nothing, which is how the AI works as well. And so we're going to reverse the process and have the artists make sense out of the chaos that the AI does. So that's something I've done already a couple times. It's super fun. It's like spilling ink and then finding a picture in it. But you get the sophisticated compositional qualities that you get from the AI, because that's what it does best, right? Its sense of compositional hierarchy and structure is phenomenal. So just take that from it and then put the humans and put real ink back into it. Kind of take back some agency. And we already did that on our YouTube channel. We just had all of our subscribers as a competition do it. And every single person that did it said, dude, this made me a better artist. I had so much fun. I want to do more of this. I learned so much from this. And so we want to extend that out and put it in an anthology book and then do it as a charity book for the Heroes Initiative. So that's a project that I'm coordinating and editing.
Okay. Rebecca Blake is a designer and the advocacy liaison for the Graphic Artists Guild. Could you briefly explain, you very kindly did this to me, and can you explain the difference between the Guild and other professional organizations so we get a little bit of a framework?
So the Graphic Artists Guild, we're an organization for illustrators of all stripes, designers of all stripes. We're a little bit different than organizations like the Society of Illustrators and AIGA in that our roots were as a labor union. We were a trade union, and we worked to our mission is to protect the economic well-being of our members and the larger community of graphic artists. By graphic artists, I mean basically any visual artist other than photographers. Since then, we're now a trade association. Now, the reason why we became a trade association, not a professional association, is because as a labor union, we were always very heavily involved with lobbying efforts, trying to get good labor laws passed for designers and illustrators, particularly for freelancers, which is just a mess. Trying to get copyright laws passed. We do a lot of engaging with the Copyright Office, talking about what the consequences of their rulemaking on how you can register your copyrights, what those consequences are for graphic artists. And as a trade association, we can do this really boring, gritty, unglamorous, boots on the ground type of work, which is absolutely vital if we want to be recognized as the economic powerhouse that we are.
Okay, now we know. Clear as a bell. Could you tell us a little bit about the Graphic Artists Guild positioning on AI and ethics? Because that's the issue right now.
Right. So we are still working on developing an ethical code for use in AI. We find ourselves at a divide. The artist community is very divided on AI, and we have artists who see the job loss, are outraged that their images were used for the data sets that were used to train the machine. And feel that AI is unethical, unprofessional, don't want anything to do with it. And then we have artists who love AI, use it, engage with it, develop work with it. We represent both sides of the coin because we have members who are adamantly opposed to AI and we have members who use AI. What we recognize is the genie's out of the bottle. This is not going to disappear. Give you guys a little reference point. This has been in development since 1965. So how do we find a path forward whereby the effects on the labor market and the effects on professional standards, the effects on the quality of images that can be produced, those bad effects are ameliorated. But at the same time, AI artists have a grounding in what is ethical. How can you ethically use these tools? Use AI not as a crutch, not as something to fill in a skill set you don't have, but as a tool in developing your own imagery. So we have to try to find a path forward. We're not going to make AI disappear. That is not going to happen in this world.
It is, there are a lot of things that someone can do with AI, but,
Yes.
but and we're still trying to figure out, is this a tool? Is this only a tool? Is this something more than that? If it's more than that, can we toolify it to fit the things we want to do forward? And labor issues, of course, are very big and looming over a lot of professionals, maybe all professionals' minds right now.
So I just spent 4 days on Capitol Hill, and I was joined with writers groups, the Authors Guild. If you know any writers who haven't joined the Authors Guild, they rock. Authors Guild Concept Art Association, which many of you may have heard of because one of their board members is a part of the class action lawsuit against Stability Diffusion and Dali, and I forget which the third one was. PPA, Professional Photographers, the Society of Composers and Lyricists. If you ever want to get sexy people to go lobbying with you, get the musicians on board, because my God, the way they put two words together. We were there basically to talk about this technology, how it has galloped forward, how there are consequences across all creative industries. What we're very clear when we speak about AI, we are not saying AI image generator platforms are evil. That's not a position that would result in anything for anyone. What we firmly believe is that AI can be used as a tool. So you can use AI, you can develop your own works off platform, bring them into AI, use it for ideation, use it to see what happens, take the work off, and then develop it off platform. That is how you can use it as a tool. The problem we have is when AI imagery is developed only through text prompts, only through capabilities that someone with no artistic ability, no skills, no training, none of the discipline and labor that goes into being an artist, that somebody with just really great taste, really great experience, and really good way with words can then use to generate images. Now, the platforms aren't that easy. You can't just input words and end up with really quality works. This definitely artists have an advantage over somebody who's untrained in using the platforms. But where are these platforms going to go? Are these going to become tools so that an artist never need be hired? That you can have a small staff within a publisher, within a corporate entity, and have that staff trained in using these systems? That's what we're concerned about, because that's where we're going to get the labor market cost. That's a pretty dystopian future, and I don't think we'll end up there. But we do have to be mindful in setting these ethical standards, professional standards, engaging with these platforms to have them understand the cost being done to the creative community, and engaging with Congress. Where can we adjust copyright law? Where can we work with the Copyright Office? Are these works even copyrightable? If you can't copyright something solely created through text prompts, then that's an advantage for the illustrator who then brings something original to that. Because if you create a derivative work, your own work in combination with the platform, your own element, those elements of those works that you created, that is copyrightable. That gives you a bit of an advantage because that means the work is licensable. So these are all the myriad ways that we're working to approach this in making sure that this is a tool and not something that will displace artists.
There are several segments to what's going on here. Number one is the input and how ethical the input was, the training of these platforms. Number two is what's going on in between and the collaboration with a human. Right. And then it's the validity of what comes out and how copyrightable that is. Right. So there maybe at least three battles to be fought here, if we can call them battles. Right. So the problem with the input, which you guys have probably heard, the problem with the input is that to create these large data sets, and we don't know how all the data sets were created, but to create the one that people think most of all is the one called Leon. That was a data set of 5 billion images that were scraped across the internet with no thought as to copyright, no thought as to privacy. There were actually images from private medical records that were scraped into this data set. And this data set was scraped. LAN is a nonprofit. I think it's at Maximilian-Universität in Munich. Mm-hmm. So it's a nonprofit, and they then developed this technology. It was done in an educational environment. And then now, of course, this technology is something that has huge market potential. So it's ended up with a very, very profitable business. So that's ethical question number one. Now, the Guild's position is
we do not believe that scraping copyrighted images into a data set is either ethical or fair use. I don't know if you guys have heard of this concept of fair use. Fair use says you can use a copyrighted work. It is fair to use this work because this use is to the benefit of society. And there's certain limitations to fair use. For example, if you're teaching and you show an image in the course of teaching, that's fair use. That's an educational use. If you are commenting on something, if you're going to write a commentary on a painting, you could show the painting because you're writing a review of this painting. That's a fair use. The argument that's being made for these data sets is that it was fair use to put them into these data sets. We don't agree with that at all. We don't think it was fair use. And many of the lawsuits that have been brought are hinging on this question of fair use. We think it was an infringing use. Therefore, is it ethical? And that is a huge question that I think each artist has to ask themselves. Is it ethical to use an AI image generator if, in fact, the original data set that was used for the machine learning came from an ethical source? I'm not going to answer that, and the Guild is not going to answer that. That's an individual decision everybody else needs to make. But the crucial thing to understand with fair use is this debate is probably going to be settled in courts in one or the other of these lawsuits. 3 things you need to understand. Number 1, lawsuits take a long period of time. There's a class action lawsuit brought by 3 artists. The class has to be verified, and then the lawsuit has to take place. We're looking 2 to 3 years. We have 2 other infringing lawsuits, corporation to corporation. Very often, corporation to corporation lawsuits end up in settlements. There is no ruling that will benefit artists. Number 2, the courts are very loath to have judgments that they feel hamper technology. The Guild has signed on to amicus briefs in court cases just involving this question of fair use in code. Why would we get involved with a court case that talks about code? We're artists. The reason why is because if you expand the idea of fair use in a certain direction, it's going to put all creative works at jeopardy. That you broaden the idea of fair use to the point where there is no protection. There's very limited protection to say something is an infringement. So the third thing that I just wanted to raise is we're crossing our fingers on these court cases with fair use. We think it's an infringing use, but there is no guarantee that the courts are going to find in our favor. So cross your fingers on that one. Did I answer the question? I kind of went off on.
You perfectly answered the question.
Thank you.
Even if you didn't, that's exactly what I would say. So we did very well.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
It's been a crash course for me personally
Yes.
since the issue became really an issue in talking with judges and agents
Yeah.
and publishers.
Yes.
Because to a certain degree, really, publishers are some of the biggest gatekeepers
Yes.
here, and a lot of what they have to say will be very influential
Yes.
in the way that the professional aspect of what we make
Right.
is. Do you know what's going on in other countries? Are we aware of some of that?
I should have done better research on that. There is a huge amount of discussion across countries, and in fact, Tim and I were both involved with putting on an AIML Media Advocacy Summit, which was basically talking. We had panels from around the globe. The Concept Art Association was the organization that really put this together, and we pinched hit and did what we could. So they had panels from different parts of the world, and they also had panels from different disciplines. All of those videos are online for you to watch. So there is an awful lot of information gathering at this point on what is the scope of the issue with artificial intelligence and machine learning across all creative disciplines. I do know that Getty Images did take a lawsuit in the UK, also talking about the infringing use of those images. I do know that the UK had considered legislation saying that the use of works into data sets for machine learning there should automatically be considered fair use. The Copyright Alliance, of which the Graphic Artists Guild is a member, you guys might be members of it as well. Copyright Alliance and a whole bunch of organizations from around the globe protested that, and they actually pulled that off the table. I do know that the EU is looking very hard at issues of artificial intelligence and machine learning, but again, there's proposed language there that does a carve-out for data sets to be used for machine learning for nonprofits. We've already seen a data set that was used for machine learning for a nonprofit that resulted in a very lucrative business. So we think that the idea that it's for a nonprofit now, therefore means it's fair use is disingenuous at the very least. But I don't think any of these policymakers have it in for creators or getting money from big technology sectors. I honestly think what has happened with artificial intelligence and machine learning is it is causing us to rethink the fundamentals of what we consider to be human artistry and the fundamentals of what copyright covers. And we're coming to this Rubicon in the United States. The other countries are as well. One of the things to remember in the United States is 95% of our copyright law was written and passed in 1976. So way before the internet. If you want to see how inadequate our system is for handling copyright infringement, take a look at what a failure the Digital Millennium Copyright Act is, the DMCA, that process whereby you find some idiot has taken your illustration and selling t-shirts with it, and what you do is you enter in a little notice saying take it off their website, and next thing you know it's cropped up on 10 other websites. That's a failure of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA process. So in a sense, this crisis is an opportunity to rethink a lot of how we are protecting and considering creative works. And I'm hoping it's going to lead to a sea change in how we approach these things.
Okay. I think we have surrounded the subject very adequately from a couple of different directions, and then we end up, we're talking about the fundamental meaning of the human soul and very, very great ideas, but fundamental for the illustrator who is making a living in the publishing world, online, in gaming, and all of this. Yeah. This means very, very different things. And it took some time. I mean, you know, when you deal with like 140 illustrators that are your faculty here at the School of Visual Arts, you hear about it really, really early. So the bells started going fairly early in the fall. And it took some time to see how I feel about this, and I was very surprised that I don't feel alarmed for it. And I think finally this morning I figured out why. But I'm not going to tell you yet. And this is where Tim comes in. Tim O'Brien, award-winning illustrator and an educator. You served as the president of the Society of Illustrators for the last 8 years. So you are the go-to person for good and bad, and you do it well. You know, we understand each other. We're both illustrators. You're a good one. I'm a bad one. And I just wanted to ask, how did the issue of AI first come to your radar? Who did you hear from first?
Hello, everyone. I'm a human artist. In the fall, just like you, I think it started to hit on social media. I started to see everyone sharing Lensa photos. And it wasn't just people I went to high school with that suddenly had 33 pretty good renderings of themselves with photos they happily gave to a company. It was my fellow illustrators who were sharing it and sharing the same wonderment, and I thought, this is a problem. So I urged the Society of Illustrators, from my position as president, we should really make a statement here. So we've always had human members. It seems like a no-brainer. And we quickly made a statement. We were the first organization to make a statement, not allowing AI into our competitions on all levels. It's a safe place to be, and it's the first thing you do is define it as not the best of something. And then because of that, I was interviewed for an article for Print Magazine, and in the article, I offered my thoughts about it and my metaphors and all the things that we use to buttress our argument. And then I was afforded a pre-publication read of the article. And in the article, another illustration organization was proudly proclaiming that they were happily engaging with it. And this was right around Christmas, and I said, shit. And I quickly got a coalition of 16 of the best illustrators I knew together from all different disciplines. Victor Nye, Carlo Ortiz, Yuko Shimizu. We all got together and I wrote a letter, and I wrote to all the illustration organizations that were worth writing to, urging them to do the same thing that Society of Illustrators did. And including the one that was about to say that they were all for it. And that person changed their mind and begged to edit the article. And they did. They changed their mind. And every organization, except for the design organizations, agreed. The design organizations demurred because it may be that they view illustration as a tool that they use, but this is our livelihood, and this is why we're happy. The making makes us happy. It's not showing up in your studio and seeing art there that just Elvis made. It's the making of it. It's the reason why you felt normal in high school. And it's why you went to art school. Because it separated pain from joy. It brought you to a happy place. That's why I do it. I love it. And so I just felt it was a safe territory to carve out. And there were some arguments saying, like, how will you know? I said, that's not a reason not to do something. I mean, there's a pond near my house, and they say, do not walk on the pond. And someone could easily say, well, people always walk on the pond. So why do we put the sign up? You just put the sign up so people can own their decisions. I feel like I'm in a safe place, and I feel like other people could be in a safe place. Say, like, I really care about what humans do, and if it benefits artists and their ability to make things, then I'm all for it. And I understand all the different points of view of this. I've been forwarded every article, right?
Yeah.
Right? That has ever been written since September, and videos and things are changing quickly. Quickly. By the end of the week, something horrible comes out, and by the end of the week, another thing comes out. It's a picture of Jesus smiling, a white Jesus smiling. Still, in the future, Jesus is white. Amazing. That's another thing, that the AI is sort of racist in its formation. So, I don't know. I was venturing off. I'm not going to...
Well, in the last year, 1,700,000 articles have been written about AI. That's it. So I have a lot of catching up to do to get a better handle of it. So you felt very strongly that action is needed. It was like a guttural kind of reaction.
Yeah. So I because I'm in this position to have, I knew that we're in a defining. There's a moment where you're defining a thing. In politics, the first thing you do when you run for office, you define your opponent, right? You do a negative ad, and you sort of say they're a terrible person. I wasn't doing negative ads. I was just sort of saying, like, this. The only thing I could say is I can control the top. And if organizations say that the best of what humans can do, that we'll award those to humans. That's important. And the companies have to work out their legalities. That's another thing. I did not go call my clients and say, will you please promise to not use it? I wasn't going to do that. You start with like, this is the best of what we can do. And you want to, and every art director has an ego. And they want to work with the best people they can work with. And if they learn that a thing is frowned upon or not preferred or it hits them in the gut, like on a professional level. And by the way, you said I'm award winning. Thank you. But what I mostly enjoy about my career is all these collaborations, these human collaborations. And if you ask any art director, what do you like about your job? I like working with the artists. It wasn't outputting something. It wasn't arriving there and soullessly putting things together. It's the collaboration in the happy accidents and the well thought out, well considered decisions that happen. The making sure Jesus is not a white guy in the future, because you could make those determinations that that's not the right decision to make. So.
You spoke about the joy of making, actually,
Yes.
the journey, and then you have the result, and then you have the collaborations. And we know that art directors really torture us to get exactly what they want. They're like, but this will do. No, it will not do.
I married one over there.
More like this or more like that to like reflect and communicate this. So it's very specific, but it's not an illustration. Half of illustration is being an entrepreneur and a lobbyist for your work. I mean, there is a very specific reason that someone's piece of art ends up on the cover of a specific publication. And I tell my kids at school, for every square inch of illustration that is published, 1,000 illustrators could have done a great job. Not a good job, a great job. There is a reason that that specific square inch of image was done by that specific person. And this is a strange mixture of art and industry that is not really separatable from each other. So it's by no means the fear that everyone will be creating beautiful illustrations and then all of a sudden the marketplace will be flooded by published works like this. The illustration doesn't work like that. Comics don't really work like that. And at some point I asked a publisher, what's going to happen if all of a sudden they tell you in order to cut costs, you got to use AI? And then he said, I'll say, why don't we cut out the author too? And then we can have something that costs even less. And then the people that buy books, they'll say, why don't we do it ourselves? Why do we need anyone to do this? So it's a very strange kind of slope that you can slide in by thinking that everything is irrelevant and inconsequential when it comes to creating. But I want to try and focus a little bit, because AI is here, and there are many reasons to use it and many reasons not to use it. So I would like to hear a little bit about an ethical AI that will do what AI does best, and humans will be able to do if they choose to. There was just like a Bill Kartalopoulos panel where AI was brought up, and it was some interesting comments were made, and it was said that AI artwork will never be you and it will never be yours. So it was these were very interesting comments. But we know that AI right now is used as a great reference, is used to do boring tasks that it takes us a long time to go in and do, from fabric design to rock design and things that you can actually apply and do. And as long as it's a mix and match, and the percentages are really up to the artist, from zero all the way to something out there, so the output actually does have their style and signature and education and know-how and instincts and all of this, it will work. It will work fine. But is there an ethical AI that will actually be of help?
Well, I feel like I'm chopping a bit about something that it applies. I think there's different ways to think about it depending what area of illustration we're talking about. One really important area of illustration that we always have to think about, and you teach, and I teach, a lot of people teach, you teach, is how we bring it into schools. I wasn't invited, but I was suddenly got an alert that there was a Pratt. I'm a faculty at Pratt. There was a Pratt AI conversation going on. I was like, oh shit, something that I didn't get forwarded, and I clicked on it and I watched this. There was a lot of people there, and suddenly I was thrown into a breakout room, and the prompt that we were given was, how do we bring AI into the classroom? And I was like, oh, well, what? Why is that the question? And I agree that it's here, but I just want to talk about education. Then you go back to your grand thing. But I think that it's important for students to learn to be blocked, to deal with being blocked, to not know a solution, to be stuck, to do a bad drawing, followed by a worse drawing, followed by being lost, followed by thinking, followed by looking at things, followed by trying something, thinking that's weird, and coming back and look, that's great, that's not weird, that's great. And then discovering how to open a door. And then you learn how to open a door. And if it ends up being a shortcut to being stuck, you're never going to learn how to do this thing that's very, very important. And then the making of it. If we remove the making of it, there'll be no illustration departments in any college. Why would you have that? It's a buggy whip maker. So you have to, there's a lot of things that if we care about education that we may not need to bring it in to the classroom. Doesn't mean we don't have to not utter the words, and doesn't mean we can't have robust conversations about it. But I don't think it's the best thing for illustration. Could be graphic design. And I know I was in this breakout room. I know they have a whole different view of it. And that's a clue to what it eventually could be, which is thought of as a button that someone uses. And so I'm a bit of I wouldn't quite say I'm a warrior, but I'm pretty adamant about this. I think that as far as education goes, an educating an illustrator, I would keep at arm's length. I think that from my cursory understanding of what publishers are saying and how they're talking to me, publishers, and art directors I'm talking to, and the publishers I'm learning about, those are people that have been working with artists for years. They have personal relationships, so they're making statements like, "We support artists. We're in it together." But it could happen very quickly, like dominoes, if one big publisher decides that they're going to start using AI-generated images. Music industry is already jumping into this quite heavily, and then sort of like a wall breaks down where people don't care and they feel like it doesn't matter. And I feel like we're still in a year of the defining of this. And I think that if you don't think you have an opinion about it, I bet you do. And I think it's important you share your opinion with anyone you can say. I'm not saying it's evil or bad. It's just like I'm not interested in it. Maybe not. I support humans. It's a good place to be. I could probably make a lot more money next year if I were to secretly start using it, because I can fix hands very easily.
It does hands perfect now.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that anymore. But I'm not interested in that. My position is not based on my own economic future. I have a retirement account and a house. I got gray in my beard. I'm fine. I'm doing this for the thousands of people that are over at Mocha Fest, who this is meaningful to them. This is the reason they want to be here on the planet. So I think about that, and so I think you could all have an opinion. It's a fine place to be. I don't know. I can't speak about how it. I'm sure in fine art, if you could tape a banana to a wall, AI is fine. Play around, have a blast. And we use the term AI a lot, and as AI image generators is what I'm talking about. AI in science is miraculous, and it may mean that there's cancer cures in the future. There's all different ways that AI will make our lives better. But removing artists is not one of them.
I would like to just add something small because art directors don't only like to work with people they know, they also love discovering new, fresh talent and knowing what their process is and how it works and their thumbnails and their ideas and their costumes and their development. So it's by no means like a very limited pool. I mean, and that's what's really fascinating about it, especially when you're teaching young illustrators.
I must say that also it's worth noting that only about 2.5 years ago, the first big effort to be more diverse happened in the illustration industry. It happened and then 2 years later, there's image generators. There's value to having all kinds of creators. It makes, in publishing, and it's important to hear stories written by the people that live those experiences, and art drawn of people by the people that are those people. You know, that's a really important thing in publishing still. You previewed, you have this glowy view about the future. I do have a hopeful view of the future. Mm-hmm. I feel like we have value because our stories are valuable. That whole, back to Mocha Fest, the reason why that's happening is that people have stories to tell. That's not a rendering party over there. Those are stories. It's amazing.
It's also full of people that want to read these stories and associate them and find themselves in them and make them theirs.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
We are we're running a little late. Do we have any questions? Please.
Yeah, hi. I noticed, I'm OK Fox of the Art and Labor podcast. I noticed a little, thread of nihilism, kind of. Yes, it's here, it's inevitable, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, it's over. But I want to push back on that just slightly, because, they've been saying that print is dead for decades and decades and decades.
Before I became an illustrator.
Exactly. And we know that's not true. We know that people crave printed materials. We know they're always going to crave printed materials. So there's always going to be that economy, and maybe the internet will keep existing in some form. But we also know that the internet can't scale. If internet usage that we in the U.S. use scaled to the rest of the world, scaled to the global south, we're talking about the digital divide since early internet, 90s era internet activism, trying to bring the internet to to the rest of the world that doesn't have as much access to it. I think it is imperative that we do not allow AI to scale, because the planet is going to collapse on the weight of the technology that is being produced. We, as workers, don't have control over these tools, and there are ways to stem the growth of the internet, and governments like China have, for example, cracked down on cryptocurrency. There's, copyright is backed by a government.
Is there a question?
Yeah, all I'm saying is, why the nihilism? There's other ways to think about it.
I think you're misinterpreting the statement. It's not a nihilistic statement. It's just saying don't tilt at windmills.
Yeah.
It's the toothpaste is squeezed. People know what the diffusion models process are, and it can be done pretty low cost on a personal computer. You can't put that back. It's a very, very simple process. You take an image, you progressively make it noisier, the machine watch it gets noisier, and then you reverse the process. And so it comes back out, which is, I'm sorry to say it, but the copyright that's a losing battle as well. Because when you understand the training process, if you win that battle, what you were saying is, I can't go to a museum and learn from looking at art, because it's just looking at art. It just has access to a massive data of art, and the art doesn't stay in there. It forms concepts and it moves on. So the debate's not going to hinge on whether it's fair use. The debate is going to hinge on whether this thing learns in the same way as a human or not. So that's all out there, and none of that's going to change. So what you have to do moving forward is understand, and say, you're saying like, oh, the internet, AI, that we have ecological concerns about this and stuff. There's what's been, it's called the green gambit. Like, we know this about big data collection, that big data collection takes a certain amount of storage. But the gambit that's being run very intentionally is that those capabilities, like we're talking about the medical field in AI, right? The gambit that's being run is that the AI having access to more information, more computational ability, and the more intelligent it gets, the more problem-solving capabilities it have, is that we are more likely to get solutions to those problems that humans won't create. And people know it's a risky gambit. They know what they're doing. But that's the only option now, because it's out of the box. And if we don't do it, someone else is going to do it, because it will be an economic or world power concern. You want China just without the ethical constraints going ahead with this stuff because it gives them advantage in the world marketplace. No, it's the same as an arms race. So what you want is people, like in the EU, they're forming digital policies that are based on, trying to win that green gambit. And yeah, it's not a nihilistic view. It's completely the opposite of that. It's saying, this is the tech that's here. This is the consequences of it. This is the psychological and, like I said, ontological consequences of our view in existence. And to have a calm, rational understanding of every factor of that, so we can best navigate what's coming. The snap decisions are where you get yourself in trouble, because you freak out legitimately about your job or your livelihood or something like that, and it's really easy to get manipulated into setting a legal precedent or something that's actually very, very unhealthy for you in general, where style itself or something becomes something where you've got too much percentage of so-and-so style, and now it's a problem. And do you want to set those precedents? So it's not nihilism. It's very careful attention to the very nuanced problems that we're going to be facing. And it's going to happen so fast. If you understand exponential growth in technology, we're probably past the singularity already, right? We passed that point. We can't keep up with the speed that technology goes psychologically as a species. So we better have those conversations carefully.
But at the same time, there's a lot of things in our world that are inevitable. I mean, climate change being one of them. If you look at the graph of where it's going to be, it's almost, to not use a straw, is that really going to do anything? But you know what? As humans, we do things we still care. We still are trying to make an effort to change things. So I don't think just because something seems inevitable doesn't mean that you don't have an opinion and you don't have agency to do something about it. And I don't want the takeaway is well, I went to this panel and it was they were all talking about it was inevitable, so fuck it. Now that's not what the takeaway is. The takeaway is that there's a variety of thoughts here, that they can have a civil conversation, and I'm allowed to have my own opinion. I think it's not my opinion. But there's humankind deals with stuff. So we'll figure out a way. And I just feel like this thing was moving quickly, and so I don't feel like we can wait to suss out what's going to happen and where should my opinion be. You can have opinion now, and you could change your mind. You could change it by August. You could change it again. But to not have an opinion until it's all figured out is not being part of the conversation. So I just have an opinion, and allow yourself the flexibility to go back and forth, but stay on my side.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I sort of need to address a few of the comments about copyright not being the thing. We do not live in a post-copyright world, and this is something the tech sector would love you to believe. Copyright is your inherent right to control the work you create in tangible form. There's been debate about whether or not copyright is a basic human right. I tend to think it is. Copyright's not just about telling people they can't use your work. It's your ability to control where your work appears. Do you want to live in a post-copyright world where an alt-right group can use your work? A white supremacist group? I don't think any of us want to be in that kind of a world. So whenever I hear the tech sector talk about how copyright's no longer really an issue, it is an issue. It's a very basic issue. Now, the concern with the fair use arguments with the use in the original data sets, the reason why this isn't a live issue that goes beyond machine learning is because if you say you can use a creative work into a data set that results in a commercial model, and somehow that's fair use because it's transformative, then your work can be used for anything without your permission. Think about it. Fair use says you can use a work if it meets certain conditions, and there are 4 factors that are considered. And the first factor is the character and the nature of the use. That is where this whole idea of a transformative work comes into place. This is why Andy Warhol can take a still photograph of Marilyn Monroe, do a posterized silkscreen of it, and it's fair use, because he has imbued that photograph with new expression and meaning. That is the transformation. Taking a creative work, putting it in a data set so that a machine can learn, and some very lucky people get to create a company that's worth billions. Is that fair use? Where's the new expression and meaning? I also don't buy the argument that because machine learning duplicates how an artist learns, by looking at images, by recreating, by looking, by recreating, by testing, how does this original compare with this? That the machine has learned the way the human is. So therefore, somehow this makes it fair use. Because it's a machine that learned. It was not a human. The crux of the copyrightability of works created by AI is, did a machine create it, or was there human creation in that process?
But that's not the deepest argument.
I don't know that we have time to go in the deepest argument. I'm answering a question.
We don't.
But consider this. I'm an art director. I work with illustrators, photographers. I give them direction. It's often very collaborative. It can be very intense. Does that mean I own the copyright of the work that came out? Does that make me the creator? I'm a graphics designer. I'm not an illustrator. I'm not the creator of an illustration I art direct. And that, in my opinion, is the equivalent of using an AI image generator with text prompts. You have an infinitely malleable illustrator with all sorts of abilities to pull up any style.
Not that malleable.
Historic. Not that malleable, but speaking in hyperbole. And that illustrator, the machine, has created a work for you. Did you create it? In my opinion, if you're just using text prompts, you're functioning as an art director. You're not the creator. This is the crux of the debate that is going to go forward. And the very last thing is, in terms of your idea on a nihilistic approach, I spent many, many years on the board of the International Council of Design. And one of the things they developed is a code of professional practices. What they did is they put the onus on the designer to consider the ethical and sustainable repercussions of decisions they make as a professional. That's what we have to imbue all of our professions with. And I think that is the answer to a world in which AI and generative platforms are going to become more and more prevalent. I do see that this is around forever. This is done ethically going to be a great tool. But we're going to have to refocus ourselves on what does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to respect human creativity? And how can we set up professional standards? How can we follow our own professional best practices? And by the way, this goes to everybody here. What can you do to protect your work online? Embed your metadata, because guess what? If you're going to be using AI image generators, chances are there are going to be systems that are going to be looking at your metadata to see where the different inputs into your work are. If it's an AI generated work, if it's a composite work, AI and original, if it's an original work. So get in the habit of embedding your metadata. Register your copyrights where you can. I know it's expensive. The Guild's working trying to make it cheaper for you. Where you can, register your copyrights. Follow best practices. And then we can make this into a system whereby we've mitigated the job loss and we've kept the human at the center of the creative process.
One of the things that I like about this is that it looks like we will have to be way more active
Yes.
as human creators in our work and where it goes and what it does. I can't believe that we will be thrown into an existential crisis every time someone throws a piece of code on us. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your attention. I really thank the panel for a really important conversation.